Welcome to today's episode of Behind the Blues. We're joined by CEO Sue Dewing and Club President Jason Kilic, taking a deep dive into the debt demolition campaign. They reflect on the challenges they faced and how the club was eventually brought back to a stable financial position.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Thomas Farms, premium, fresh Australian produce at your doorstep.
Jason, I'm going to go to you first. Can you tell us how you came to be on the board and what were your immediate impressions of the situation the club was in back then?
Well, Laura, that was back in 2007. I was appointed to the board and Richard Allen was the then president. It was a male-only board back then. I then took over as president in 2010. But I must say the situation back in 2007, 2008 appeared to be pretty good because a lot of the figures we got weren't, unfortunately, that accurate. So we had some, like a false sense of security and sort of position. But of course, we did realise, about a year or so down the track that, tax hadn't been paid, superannuation hadn't been paid, payroll tax. We actually found some BAS statements in our accountants' drawers. We had an internal accountant at the time. So, it all, blew up around about 2008, 2009, and it was pretty ugly.
Sue, do you remember anything at the time? You were living overseas then, correct?
Yes, so that was in 2012. I was the director of events at Pebble Beach Company, and I decided to come back to Australia. And the then CEO of PreSturt, Matt Benson, contacted me to see if I would be interested in being the first female on the board of PreSturt. I naturally thought, yes, of course I would. I loved the club since I was 5 years old, so I saw that as being a great honour.
Were you at all worried? There's this phenomenon called the glass cliff, where a woman is brought in and then gets the blame if things go wrong. Was that something that you were worried about?
Glass ceiling?
Glass cliff.
Oh, okay. I always heard it was the ceiling.
Yeah, so the cliff is when it doesn't go well.
No, because at my first meeting, I actually realised at the first meeting what state of affairs the club was in, which was pretty dire, and so my fear at that moment was I would be the first female on the last board, and that we would not have a club. So no, I hadn't thought about the glass cliff though.
I remember that meeting very well, and I'll never forget your face, Sue. And it was pretty cruel of us to do that to you, but because we did target you, and we wanted you to be a part of the board, but it was probably, I'd have to say, one of the worst meetings we've had in terms of what we had uncovered and what was in front of us. So it was pretty unfair of us to do that to you, Sue. But hey,
Yeah, I recall that meeting where we went to the Sandfall. I think this was in November, late November maybe, and we, as a board, all met with the Sandfall on a Friday afternoon, and we basically told them we're going to shut the doors unless they gave us some help. The only help they gave us was 3 months in advance of our distribution, and they proceeded to tell us about their cash flow problems. And I'll never forget our looks when we left that meeting and sat at a coffee shop and just looked at each other in absolute despair.
We did. We actually all dressed in our board attire and went in with a plan, but it was met with a brick wall because we really had to jump through some hoops to even get that 3 months advance on our distribution. There was never a bailout. I think we have to clarify that we've never been bailed out. We've never actually, borrowed, SANFL money. We did it by ourselves.
Yeah, no equalisation payments.
So when you were met with that brick wall, what was your next step? How did you even go, okay, here's what we try next?
Well, I think that, I guess putting us under enormous pressure, brought the best out in some people and probably the worst out in others. But what it did, it just sort of propelled us into this, frame of mind, and it was really how we sort of hatched our survival plan. And so you'd remember, I think we had a Saturday meeting down at what is now La Scala. It was like an emergency board meeting where we devised a plan which we called a survival plan, and what that entailed was just how we were going to get through this. And some of the things we came up with was selling 4 poker machine entitlements, going to the bank, asking for interest only, a Fight Back 5,000 membership program, talking to or seeking out benefactors and donations. And really it was sort of the birth of the debt demolition campaign as well. I ended up writing a letter to Jimmy Steins, the then president of Melbourne Football Club, because they'd just been through a debt demolition. Well, they really, I guess, were the pioneers of debt demolition. They wiped out, I think, $6 million in 2 years. So anyway, I wrote to Jimmy and I said, look, Jimmy, I admire you for what you've done for the Melbourne Footy Club. I'm from the PreSturt Football Club. I'm the president of the PreSturt Football Club, and I've got 2 million good reasons why I need to talk to you. I got a response pretty quickly and said, look, Jimmy's not well because unfortunately he was in that sort of stage of his illness. But the 2IC, McLarden, I think is his surname, was happy to meet with us. So we flew over to Melbourne and met, and they pretty much gave us the formula or the recipe for debt demolition. And that was just how you approach people, just what sort of events you can hold, etc. And we took that back to PreSturt and implemented it.
Yeah, that's something I've been wondering about. So the debt demolition involved having a lot of hard conversations with a lot of people. How did you convince stakeholders like banks and sponsors to get behind the club where, the track record probably wasn't the biggest selling point?
Well, because we were a foundation SANFL club, and we did put it on people that if they weren't willing to help us, then would they want to be responsible for the demise of the then, I think we were 113 years old, Jason?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that it would be such a travesty, tragedy, whatever you wanted to call it, to not have PreSturt Football Club anymore.
And there was really, there were sort of two fronts of our battle. One was, I guess, rallying or getting onto members and sponsors to rally behind the club. The other was, debt demolition, going and having those hard conversations with people who we knew would, possibly write us a check. And we had a list of 30 people. I actually still remember the lunch where myself, Matt Benson and Michael Hart sat down. We wrote a target list of 30 people, and I've still got that filed away. I'll never throw that away. And we said, right, we've got to start this program and we have to be ruthless. We drank a lot of coffee over the next 6 months. We met with a whole bunch of people and pretty much looked them in the eye and said, look, if you love PreSturt, you would give us some money, and guess what? You're not going to get it back. So if you want the club to survive, please hand over for hard-earned dollars, and you won't be seeing it back. And that's what we did. And it's incredible how many people did give to us. I guess by the same token, there was a whole bunch of people who could well afford it that wouldn't give us a cent because they didn't want to see, good money after bad. But it was very humbling. There were some people who clearly couldn't afford it, but were handing over checks the size of $5,000, $10,000.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because on my desk I have a jar of coins. Yeah. I don't exactly know how much is in there, but I keep it on my desk as a reminder of debt demolition. And it was actually handed into the club by a little girl who loved PreSturt Football Club, and she saved all her pocket money and gave it to the club. And to this day, I still don't know who that little girl, maybe big girl now, was, but it's there as a reminder, don't ever go down that track again. If you're relying on a young child to give their hard-earned savings, then we've just got to make sure this never happens again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if that little girl is listening, now a big girl, let us know.
Yes. We'll let you run out with the team.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by True to Blue Real Estate, proudly independent and community focused.
Another quick story about that. Matt and I went out to see let's call him a benefactor at that time. And this was in a week where we were going from meeting to meeting. So we were going, between the bank and the Frickers who owned the Castle Tavern and the Sandfall, and then back to the bank and back and forth and all over the place. And we went out and saw this one generous gentleman who's still involved at the club. Don't want to mention names, but we sat down with him and he said, look, I'll hand over a check and it'll be a 5-figure sum. But he said, will we survive? And I looked at him, I said, well, I can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
But if you don't hand the check over, well, then certainly
we won't.
It's going to be a step towards closing the doors. So that's the sort of period we're in. And that night we ended up going to the volunteers dinner, where we had our sort of annual dinner with 100 or so volunteers. And I looked around the room, and of course I knew exactly what was going on and just how close we were to closing the doors. But to see the joy on people's faces as receiving awards, and they were sitting down all having dinner together, reflecting on the season. I took it on as my personal goal not to let the club fold, because it would crush so many, probably including myself. So
I had an experience similar to that, Jason, after the meeting that we had with the Sandfall. I was walking around Victoria Park afterwards just to clear my head, and next minute a bunch of PreSturt players ran past, and they must have been doing some, running drills. And I'll never forget, they were laughing and carrying on, and I looked at them and I thought, you guys don't have a clue what's going on here, and we just cannot let this club fail. There's just so many people riding on this club.
Yeah.
What experiences from both of your professional lives pre-PreSturt do you think really set you up to handle the situation?
So you want to go first?
Well, I suppose I had worked in the United States at Pebble Beach Company during 9/11. And that was quite a sobering experience. A lot of people at the company then lost their job, and, America was in those early days thrown into a bit of turmoil and recession. We'd also gone through a GFC, but I don't think anything had really properly prepared me for PreSturt. We were poorer than a church mouse. And it was just, it was even apparent around the club. The club was looking a bit messy and dirty and wasn't really cared for. For me, I wanted to address that side of it. I don't know if that was as important for some of the others, but I always think that perception's reality, and I wanted people to think of us as a successful club. So we needed to look the part.
I think for me, coming from an engineering background and being involved in, then my father's business, which was quite successful, I wasn't used to dealing with debt or hard times or poor cash flow. So PreSturt really taught me a lot. But I guess the principles I took with me, from my business into PreSturt was that you just need to chip away every single day, just chip away. And as a little thing I do on the way home, as I'm driving home, I ask myself the question, what have I achieved today? What have I done to get me closer towards my goal? And I do that. I do that with the engineering business, but I also do that with PreSturt. I drive home and think, okay, what have we done today, at PreSturt that's made us a better club or got us closer to where we need to be. So that's the way I approach, business and PreSturt.
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement, absolutely.
Yeah, if you haven't heard it before, that is Jason's catchphrase and something we try and live by. You both talked about tapping into people's love for PreSturt, and that's something I want to flesh out a little bit. Fan and member engagement is something we're really proud of here at PreSturt, and I guess all clubs like to think that, but I feel that we do it really well. How did you identify that would be a key part of the club's recovery?
Do you want me to answer this, Jason?
Sure.
So I wanted our supporters to fall back in love with PreSturt again. Everything was about the negative and that, and wanted to turn those negatives into positives. I wanted people to feel that passion for the club that I had as a young girl growing up, where I would, I idolised the players. I devoured the newspaper for information on PreSturt. I went to games, and I just remember that as being such a great part of my youth, growing up and going to PreSturt games. And I wanted a bit of that back, and I wanted the club to be sexy. For people not to think of it as old and cruddy, but to be sexy and innovative and fresh. And I think that Jason's a bit that way too. And I think together and along with some other people, we've really managed to achieve that. And I think we actually do it better than anyone else. We are the benchmark. People look to us as to what we're doing.
No, agreed. And that's been your thing, Sue. That's what you've brought to the club, amongst other things. But just the whole, the focus on brand, the focus on product, the game day experience, engagement with everyone, whether that be the fans, the members, the sponsors, the players, what you and the Baggies have done. As you said, you've gone through the club with a dose of salts, cleaned everything out, repaired everything, painted everything.
We're not talking metaphorically here either.
You've got to, if you want to be professional, you have to look professional.
Yeah, we do.
And that's what I think. We've re-engaged with PreSturt fans or PreSturt people.
We talk about getting the club back on track. What did back on track look like for each of you?
For me, back on track, or the big thing for me was I think it was April of 2013. We still owed the players a significant amount of money from the previous season, and the next season had already started. So it was like a tumbleweed, and it was getting bigger and bigger. So for me, that core, that's what we are. We're a football club. We have football players, and we were not even managing to pay that core group. And for me, that has become, that's how I measure now is, are the players paid? Yes, the players are paid. We're doing fine. And as long as that continues, that is what I use as my marker. And I'm happy to say that since I think the end of 2014, we've been able to pay the players regularly, on time, and I think the players have really come to trust that and appreciate it.
What about you, Jason?
That was one of the priorities. But for me, there were so many milestones over the way that I can't remember dates. It's just been this rocky journey where we've been at rough seas for so many years. I can't remember what the coordinates were or the wind conditions or the size of the waves, but a couple of the major things were what we owed the Australian Tax Office, and I remember at one point we were at about 200,000, and I was looking for ways to, I guess, look for a waiver of that $200,000. By the time I got down that path and spoke to various clubs around Australia and whatever else, we nearly paid it off. And of course, when we did pay it off, remember, Sue, we got a massive rebate.
Yes.
It was in the order of like $60,000 or $80,000.
I think it was more than double that.
We were dancing in the street, and then all of a sudden, we started getting on top of payroll tax and the super had been paid. But another big one was council. Remember when we got, I guess, on top of council payments, and we sat around the boardroom table and looked at each other and thought, guys, we're actually up to date with council. How good is this? And then there were others like creditors, like say, Nelson Teamwear, who, we owed a lot of money for a long time, and they, their payment terms to us were just incredible. And then, and we were up to date with them, and just a whole lot of other creditors. So I don't know, it really snowballed, and I guess success breeds success, right?
When we stopped having to pay cash for things up front, that was also a good time as well. I'll never forget that we did receive a rebate from the state government at the time, because we had, regarding payroll tax, some clubs had been doing things the wrong way and we had been doing things the right way. And there was some relief given to the other clubs rather than fine them. And because of that relief given to the other clubs, the state government decided that we should be rebated what we had paid, and we got just shy of a couple of $100,000. And I'll never forget, that was given to us from Tom Koutsantonis. And we were just all so pleased. And it's fair to say a lot of the board are not Labor voters, but we did go to lunch with Mr. Koutsantonis. And it was actually really refreshing to get to know him and to thank him and his department for that, because we were just on top of the world. It was, we had money in the bank at that stage. Finally.
It was a great lunch, and we sincerely thanked him. And I guess, we were lucky recipients of that, because, we had done the right thing in terms of, grouping the entities. But remember, we did use the opportunity as well, Sue, to throw out our plans for building the Blues and,
yes.
and our facilities. We ended up getting the money from the for that through the Office of Rec and Sport. So it certainly didn't fall on deaf ears.
No.
Never waste an opportunity, Jason.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Tyndall Gas Bedley Lawyers, celebrating 50 years of service to South Australians.
What are the key things that the club has to keep delivering and the markers we have to keep hitting to never really go back to those times again? You talk about paying the players, but in terms of things internally that we have to keep doing to make sure it never slides back to that.
I think one of the things we would always say to each other is, we have to live within our means. And that was certainly a message as we sort of came out of that demolition phase. To not only the board but all of our members, is that as a club we have to live within our means. We can't go out and borrow stupid amounts of money and get into ventures without doing the proper due diligence and good governance in, looking at, the risk scenario. So, we're very cautious now about exposure to the club. We can't put the club in that position anymore. So that for me is always, I guess, rung true, and I'll stick with that. That we just have to always think about living within our means. And I think now so more than ever. Sorry, just with coronavirus, and just what the competition, what the Sturt Football Club's going to look like at the end of this period. I'm confident we're going to survive, but we're going to survive because of just the way we've been managing the club over the last 5 or 6 years and living within our means, keeping ourselves in a good position.
Yes, I would totally agree with that, Jason. That's how I would have answered it. But I also think that we need to be agile and adapt and be ahead of changes in our environment. Whilst we could not have envisioned a pandemic ever, I think as you said, yes, we were pretty set up, and we will get through this period. It's going to be tough, but we will get through it because of how we have now structured the club. I wouldn't want to have to go through this again, but I think Jason's exactly right. It's on the money there. You have to live within your means, and you also have to create a culture of success actually within the club. You don't go out and buy that success, because that is never going to work, and then you will end up not living within your means if you have to go and buy success.
What lessons have you both taken away from this journey personally and professionally?
I think after 2016, my wife said to me, I came home after a pretty big night at the Arca Bar. In fact, I didn't come home at all, but I think I staggered in around about 9 o'clock in the morning, and my wife gave me probably...
That was the Tuesday, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. But anyway, she gave me the biggest compliment anyone's ever given me, and that was that she said, "Is there anything you can't achieve?" Right? And look, I acknowledge, the premiership wasn't mine, all of mine, but she saw, what I went through, with the personal sacrifices and the stress and the time. So for me, I think that was the biggest lesson, that, you set your mind to something, you set a goal, you can achieve it. And nothing was going to stop me.
Yeah, I think mine is just never relax, just always just be on your toes. As I said before, you've got to adapt in this industry. It's changing all the time. And it's funny because after Demo, and we sort of got onto level ground again, I think Jason and I have often discussed that we will never go through that again. So you can imagine our dismay at the moment going through this pandemic, which was not of our making this time. The last time it was of the club's making, but this time it is. But I feel like we've got the strength to be able to take it on, Jason. We learned a lot from before. Probably, we're a bit more steeled for it than maybe others would be. But yes, I think we deserve another premiership soon, though.
Yeah.
Off-field success is also made all the sweeter by on-field success. Can you talk a bit about how you managed to tie those two things together? So, you talked about not going and buying your own players, but obviously 16 and 17 were the culmination of a lot of years of hard work. How did the off-field success set us up for on-field success?
Yeah, really good question. I remember doing a strategic review, business plan building, exercise with the club back in 2008.
Was there butcher's paper?
There probably was, yes, yeah. No overhead projectors. It's funny. You had all the key elements in that business plan, and we had a separate sort of strategic plan, but it all kept coming back to financial stability, because without the financial stability, you couldn't have a decent football program. You couldn't have decent players. You couldn't invest in your juniors to grow your own players. So they sort of they go hand in hand. You have to get your financial situation or your finances sorted out to get that on-field success. I mean, if you get on-field success while being broke, and we have seen a couple of clubs do that in recent history, it doesn't last. It doesn't last, and you just get yourself into more trouble. And this goes back to living within your means. So first, financial stability, financial success, and then football. And football was the last piece in the puzzle that we really tackled, wasn't it, Sue? Like with the rebuilding of the club, once we got through debt demolition, once we got we were able to pay players and the tax office and creditors, etc. Then we actually had the money to restructure the footy department, and it was no coincidence that within 12 months or so we won a premiership.
It also comes down to the people. You've got to surround yourself with good people. We had good people at the club, and we were very specific about the people that we wanted here. We're very specific about the players that we want here too. So, we don't get too many that come in and don't, want to try and change things. Our players are pretty aligned to our mission and our vision and our values, and that filters throughout the whole club.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's always about the people, isn't it?
Yes.
Always. Yeah.
Yes.
And, knowing that the lights are going to come on and that the pay is going to land in your bank balance does wonders for club morale as well. Any lessons that you wanted to leave with members or supporters who are listening to this?
Stick by the club. Yes, it's going to be it's a tumultuous time, but stick with us. We'll come out the other side. We don't know what footy is going to look like on the other side, but we will be back playing. Our senior men, our senior women will be playing again. And we just thank those members and supporters that get behind the club, and hope to see you at the footy whenever that resumes.
Yeah, spot on. Yes, the biggest help anyone can give us right at this moment is just to keep the membership going. Pay your membership. You come out of this. But of course, we want to come back and resume on the path that we were on, and that is building the Blues. We're building the Blues. We've already finished stage one. There's stage 2 on the table. It's all about building a strong, successful club for the future. That remains at the top of our list.
Thank you both for joining me, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of some of the members when they say thank you for sharing those really honest insights into what's been a rough time for the club, and also thank you both for your service, because it sounds like it would have been a very different world without the two of you.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Good job.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Join us every Tuesday for new episodes of Behind the Blues. In the meantime, go Blues!
This is a PreSturt Football Club podcast.